The aftermath of war, the rise of an empire. The war had ended, but the battle for the future had just begun. Captain Darius Kane stood on the bridge of the battleship Vanguard, his gaze fixed on the debris floating in the cold vacuum of space. Burnt-out enemy ships, shattered stations, and lifeless bodies drifted like ghosts of a war that had cost millions of lives. The battle was over, but victory felt hollow. The enemy, the Xilari Dominion, had been defeated after years of brutal conflict. Their once mighty fleets were now nothing but wreckage. Their homeworld was in ruins, their leaders either dead or in hiding. Humanity had survived, but at a terrible price. Planets were reduced to wastelands, entire colonies had vanished, and countless families had been torn apart. Yet, as Kane stood there, he knew that war was not the true enemy. The real danger had always been within. The shadow of betrayal. "Sir, priority message from High Command," said Lieutenant Rhea, breaking the heavy silence. Kane turned, his sharp blue eyes meeting hers. "Put it through." The holographic screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Pierce, one of the highest-ranking officers of the United Earth Federation. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his expression was hard as steel. "The war is over, Captain," Pierce began. "But the traitors who sold us out to the Xilari are still out there. You know what this means." Kane clenched his jaw. He knew exactly what it meant. During the war, some humans had betrayed their own species, feeding information to the enemy, sabotaging fleets, and weakening defenses. They had been the reason for many of humanity's worst defeats. But when the Xilari lost, those traitors didn't disappear. They ran. "We have confirmed reports that they escaped into deep space," Pierce continued. "We believe they are regrouping, building something new. They still have resources, stolen ships, and weapons. If they aren't stopped now, they'll rise again." Kane's hands tightened into fists. He had lost friends because of those traitors. Good soldiers, brave men and women who had trusted their own kind, only to be stabbed in the back. He had sworn that when the war ended, he would not rest until every last betrayer paid for what they had done. "Where are they?" Kane asked. Pierce's expression darkened. "Our scouts tracked their last movements to the Outer Rim. An old system, mostly abandoned, but it seems they've taken over several asteroid bases. We also intercepted coded transmissions, calls for unity, for a new order." Kane's eyes narrowed. "They're trying to build an empire." "Yes," Pierce confirmed. "A new empire. One that would see humanity under their rule, twisted by their ideals. If they succeed, we could be looking at another war within a decade." Kane's voice was cold. "Then we stop them before that happens. The hunt begins." The bridge of the Vanguard stirred to life as Kane turned toward his crew. "Prepare for departure. Set course for the Outer Rim." Rhea hesitated. "Sir, do we have orders for an all-out strike?" Kane shook his head. "Not yet. First, we confirm their location. We find out who's leading them, how strong they are. Then, we wipe them out before they can even begin." The ship rumbled as its engines powered up. The Vanguard was one of the most advanced warships in the fleet, a vessel that had survived countless battles. Now, it would serve as the spearhead in humanity's next fight. Kane stared at the stars ahead, his mind focused on what lay ahead. These weren't just traitors. They were war criminals. They had turned their backs on their own people, choosing greed and power over loyalty. And now, they thought they could escape justice. They were wrong. "We end this," Kane said quietly. Rhea nodded. "Aye, Captain." The Vanguard entered warp, vanishing into the dark void. The war had been just the beginning. Now, the real hunt had begun. The first lead. The Vanguard sliced through the vast emptiness of space, its engines burning like a silent predator hunting in the dark. The Outer Rim was a place of forgotten worlds, lawless sectors, and secrets buried in the void. If the traitors were hiding anywhere, it would be here. Captain Darius Kane stood at the command console, watching the incoming data stream. The fleet's intelligence had picked up something, a distress signal from Argos 9, a remote mining outpost abandoned during the war. Why would a dead colony send a distress signal? Lieutenant Rhea asked, her brow furrowed. That's what we're going to find out, Kane replied. But this isn't just any signal. It contained a name. He brought up the decoded message on the main screen. Among the garbled words and interference, one thing stood out. Commander Victor Holloway. Silence fell over the bridge. The name sent a wave of tension through the crew. Holloway had been one of their own, a decorated officer in the Earth Federation Navy. He had led entire fleets during the war. Then, at the critical moment, he vanished. Ships under his command had gone dark, supply lines were cut, and enemy forces attacked where defenses should have been strongest. The Federation had called it one of the worst betrayals in human history. Now, after years of silence, his name resurfaced. It's a trap, Rhea said, her voice firm. Kane nodded. Probably. But we're walking into it anyway. The descent to Argos 9. The Vanguard dropped out of warp near Argos 9, the planet a dead husk beneath them. The once thriving colony was reduced to abandoned buildings and dust storms swirling over the frozen surface. Mining operations had shut down years ago, leaving only hollowed-out tunnels and rusted machinery. Kane led the landing team, himself, Rhea, and 5 heavily armed soldiers. Their shuttle touched down near the main outpost, its landing thrusters kicking up a cloud of dust. "Stay sharp," Kane ordered as the airlock hissed open. They stepped onto the cracked surface, weapons raised, eyes scanning the ruins. The silence was unnatural. No signs of life. No movement, just the wind howling through broken metal structures. Signal came from the main control tower, Rhea said, checking her scanner. 50 meters ahead. As they moved forward, Kane felt it. A presence. The kind that made every soldier's instincts scream danger. Something was watching them. The ghost colony. The control tower's doors had been forced open. Inside, the walls were marked with strange symbols, painted in dark red. The air smelled of burned circuits, and something worse, something rotten. Rhea knelt beside a terminal, brushing away dust. "The power's been restored recently," she said. "Somebody was here." Kane moved deeper inside, his weapon at the ready. Then he saw it. A man, slumped against the wall, barely alive. His uniform was torn, his face bruised. When he looked up, his bloodshot eyes widened in fear. "They knew you'd come," he whispered. Kane knelt beside him. Who did this?" The man coughed, struggling to speak. "Holloway. He's not running." Kane's grip on his rifle tightened. "What do you mean?" The man's lips trembled. "He's building an army. And you're already too late." A sudden beeping noise filled the room. Kane's heart dropped. A trap. "Move E," he shouted. An explosion rocked the building, sending fire and shrapnel through the air. The walls collapsed as dust and smoke filled the room. The enemy was already here, and the hunt had truly begun. The ghost colony. The explosion ripped through the control tower, sending a shockwave of dust and debris in every direction. Kane hit the ground hard, his ears ringing from the blast. The dim emergency lights flickered as smoke filled the air. His instincts screamed. This wasn't just a warning. It was an execution. "Status," Kane barked, coughing as he pushed himself up. "I'm good," Rhea shouted, her voice muffled through the ringing. "Jackson's down." One of the soldiers, Carter, dragged the injured Marine away from the crumbling structure. Jackson groaned, his armor scorched but still breathing. Kane's mind raced. Holloway had set this up. He wanted us here. But why? Then he saw movement outside the shattered window. Figures in dark armor, moving fast. "We've got company," Rhea said, raising her rifle. The enemy reveals itself. A series of sharp, red laser sights flickered through the dust-filled air. Then the gunfire started. Kane and his team dove for cover as plasma bolts shattered what remained of the room. The enemy soldiers moved with precision, covering each other as they advanced. They weren't just scavengers or mercenaries. They were trained, disciplined. "They're using old Earth Federation tactics," Rhea muttered, returning fire. "This isn't just some rogue group." Kane gritted his teeth. Of course, these weren't mercenaries. These were ex-soldiers, Holloway's men. A grenade clattered onto the floor. "Back, back." Kane grabbed Rhea and pulled her into the next corridor, just as the explosion tore through the space they had just occupied. The team scrambled through the ruins, trying to break free from the ambush. Their attackers moved fast, closing in. They weren't just trying to kill them, they were trying to capture them. The dark message. They made it to an abandoned processing station, ducking into cover. The enemy fire slowed, but they weren't retreating. "They're surrounding us," Carter muttered, gripping his rifle. Kane's mind worked fast. They needed an escape route. He tapped into his comms. "Vanguard, come in. We are under heavy attack. Request immediate extraction." Silence. "Vanguard, respond." More silence. Rhea's expression darkened. "They're jamming us." A crackling voice suddenly echoed through the station's intercom system, distorted but chillingly familiar. "Captain Kane." Kane's blood ran cold. "Holloway," he muttered. The voice chuckled. "I was hoping you'd come. You always were predictable." Kane's grip on his weapon tightened. "Where are you?" "Closer than you think," Holloway replied. "And this was just a test." A shiver ran through Kane's spine. "You came here hunting ghosts," Holloway continued. "But we are no ghosts, Kane. We are the future, and you, my friend, are living in the past." Kane scanned the room, searching for any signs of surveillance. Holloway was watching them, listening. "Your Federation is dying, Kane. A broken system clinging to power. And when it falls, my empire will rise from its ashes." A cold realization hit Kane. This wasn't just a rogue group of traitors. Holloway was building something bigger, something dangerous. And he wasn't hiding. He was challenging them. "Let's see if you can make it out alive," Holloway's voice said before the transmission cut off. The station's lights flickered. Then, a loud rumble shook the ground beneath them. Something big was coming. And Kane knew they were running out of time. "The chase begins." The ground beneath them rumbled violently. Kane knew that sound. It wasn't just another explosion. It was something massive moving. "We need to move. Now," Kane ordered. His team sprinted out of the abandoned processing station, weaving through the wreckage. The dust-choked sky above cracked open as something emerged from the ground, a massive mechanical construct rising from beneath the ruins. Rhea's eyes widened. "What the hell is that?" It was a warship, half-buried, hidden beneath the colony's remains. The traitors hadn't just been hiding here. They had been building something. And now it was waking up. Engines flared to life, thrusters shaking off years of debris. The ship's hull bore a new insignia, a broken Earth Federation crest, twisted into something darker. Kane clenched his fists. Holloway wasn't just running. He was preparing for war. Escape or die. Get to the shuttle. Kane barked. Blaster fire rained down from above as enemy troops on the rising warship opened fire. Kane's squad fired back, covering each other as they sprinted for their shuttle. Carter was hit, dropping to one knee. Rhea yanked him up, dragging him forward. Almost there. Then, the ground collapsed. The whole colony sank as the rising warship's engines tore apart the foundations of Argos 9. Buildings crumbled, dust and fire filling the air. The shuttle was gone, swallowed by the chaos. "We're trapped," Rhea shouted. Kane's mind raced. Think. Think. Then his eyes locked onto the rising warship's hull, where a small docking hatch was still exposed. He pointed. "That's our way out." His team hesitated. You want us to board an enemy ship? Carter coughed, still struggling. Kane's expression was ice cold. You want to stay down here? No one argued. They ran, boarding the beast. The docking hatch was closing. They had seconds. Kane sprinted ahead, leaping for the ledge, barely catching the edge. He gritted his teeth, hauling himself up, one by one. His team followed. Just as the last soldier got inside, the hatch slammed shut. They were inside the enemy ship, and now the real fight would begin. The revelation. The interior was eerily silent. The halls were dimly lit, steel corridors stretching into darkness. Weapons ready, Kane whispered. They moved quietly, navigating through the unfamiliar ship. The air was thick with the scent of oil, metal, and something else. Something old. Then they reached a control station. Rhea worked fast, hacking into the terminal. When the screen flickered on, her face paled. Kane, she whispered, you need to see this. The screen displayed schematics, not just for this ship, but for dozens of warships. And beneath that, a countdown. 36 hours, Rhea said, voice tight. That's when they launch. Kane felt the weight of the moment settle over him. Holloway hadn't just built an empire. He was about to start a war. Kane turned to his team, eyes burning with determination. We stop this. Now. The hunt had led them here. Now, it was time to strike. The space ambush. The cold steel walls of the enemy warship seemed to close in around Kane and his team as they crouched in the dimly lit corridor. The air was thick with tension. The countdown on the stolen schematics still burned in Kane's mind. -36 hours until Holloway's fleet launched. They had to act fast. Where's the command deck? Kane asked, his voice low but firm. Rhea worked furiously at the console, fingers flying over the keys. Deck 4. But there's a problem. Kane exhaled sharply. There's always a problem. They know we're here, she said grimly. Security lockdown just activated. We're about to have company. A metallic hiss filled the corridor as security doors slammed shut behind them. Footsteps echoed through the ship, heavy boots, getting closer. They're trying to box us in, Carter muttered, gripping his rifle tighter. Kane clenched his jaw. Then we break out. The firefight. The first enemy soldier rounded the corner, his rifle already raised. Kane didn't hesitate. One shot. One kill. The traitor dropped, his weapon clattering to the floor. Then hell broke loose. More enemy soldiers swarmed the corridor, firing in controlled bursts. The walls lit up with the glow of energy rounds, the smell of burning metal filling the air. Kane's team pushed forward, using the narrow hallway as a choke point. Carter took a shot to the shoulder but stayed on his feet. Rhea emptied her clip, taking down 2 soldiers with precise headshots. We can't hold here forever, she shouted over the chaos. Kane spotted a side hatch labeled Engineering Access. There, he ordered. Move. His team dove through the hatch, sealing it behind them just as another grenade exploded in the hallway. They were alive. For now. A desperate plan. The engineering bay was vast, filled with humming generators and coolant pipes stretching in every direction. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and deep inside enemy territory, Carter panted. We need a miracle. We don't need a miracle, Kane said. We just need to be smarter. He turned to Rhea. Can you access their ship's comms? Rhea nodded, pulling up another console. Yeah, but they'll know I'm in. Good, Kane said. Patch me through to the Vanguard. Static filled the air for a moment. Then, a familiar voice. Captain Kane. Admiral Pierce's voice crackled through the channel. Where the hell are you? Kane allowed himself a small smirk. Inside the enemy's flagship, and I need immediate extraction. Pierce swore. You infiltrated the ship. Alone. Not alone, Kane corrected. But we don't have much time. Holloway's fleet launches in less than 36 hours. We need to take this ship down now. Silence. Then, "We're on our way," Pierce said. "Stand by for reinforcements." Kane cut the transmission. "Now we just need to survive until they get here." As if on cue, the security doors burst open. Enemy soldiers poured in. Kane gritted his teeth, raising his weapon. This wasn't over yet. The space ambush. Outside, the Vanguard and a small strike fleet dropped out of warp. But the enemy was waiting. Holloway's fleet, hidden inside the asteroid belt surrounding Argos 9, sprang their trap. Dozens of warships uncloaked, weapons hot. The ambush had begun. On board the Vanguard, Admiral Pierce barely had time to react. Multiple hostiles inbound. The tactical officer shouted, "Shields up! All ships, defensive formations." Pierce barked. The battle erupted in the void of space, laser fire streaking across the stars. The Vanguard fought back with everything it had, but the enemy had the advantage. Inside the flagship, Kane and his team were running out of time. More soldiers stormed the engineering bay. Kane saw only one way out. "We take control of this ship," he growled, "or we go down with it." The final battle had begun. The prisoner's truth. The firefight inside the enemy flagship was relentless. Kane and his team moved with precision, ducking behind steel barriers, firing in controlled bursts. The engineering bay echoed with gunfire, the smell of burning circuits and ozone thick in the air. "Rhea, how much longer?" Kane called out, his rifle spitting plasma rounds at the advancing traitors. "Almost there," she shouted, frantically working at a nearby console. If they could override the ship's command functions, they could turn the entire vessel against its own fleet. Another explosion rocked the ship as the battle outside intensified. The Vanguard and its strike fleet were holding their ground, but Holloway's hidden warships were tearing through their defenses. "We're out of time," Carter growled, slamming a fresh energy cell into his rifle. Then a new alarm blared. Rhea's eyes widened. "Security override detected. Someone's coming." Kane turned just as a side door hissed open. But it wasn't more enemy soldiers. It was a prisoner. The captive reveals the truth. The figure stumbled forward. A man in tattered Federation officer's gear, shackles still clamped to his wrists. His face was bruised, his uniform stained with dried blood. He looked up at Kane with wild, desperate eyes. "They knew you'd come," the prisoner rasped. Kane's grip tightened on his rifle. "Who are you?" The man coughed. "Lieutenant Commander Derek Voss, Federation Intelligence." Carter cursed. "He's one of ours." Voss nodded weakly. "I was captured 6 months ago. They've been using me." "For what?" Rhea asked, cautiously stepping forward. Voss inhaled shakily. "To build the fleet." Kane's expression darkened. "Explain." Voss pointed toward the main console. "The countdown isn't just for their launch. It's for activation." Voss's voice was hoarse, filled with fear. "These aren't just stolen ships. Holloway has an eye-controlled fleet. He's been developing self-operating warships, thousands of them. No crew, no pilots, just programmed death machines." The room fell silent. "That's impossible," Rhea whispered. "A-controlled warships were banned after the Sol Rebellion." Voss gave a grim nod. "That's why he's using an old Silari I-core. He scavenged the tech from the war, improved it. These ships don't need pilots. They need only one command: eradicate the Federation." Kane's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a rebellion. This was the beginning of a second war. The impossible choice. Outside, the battle raged on. The Vanguard was struggling, shields flickering as it took heavy fire. More of Holloway's warships were deploying, and they were waking up. Kane turned to Rhea. "Can we shut them down?" She bit her lip, scanning the prisoner's data. "No, but we can delay the launch. If I corrupt the AI's command pathways, it could buy us time." Kane clenched his jaw. It wasn't enough. The Vanguard wouldn't last much longer. His team was trapped in enemy territory, and in less than 36 hours, an unstoppable AI war fleet would burn the Federation to the ground. There was only one option. "We have to destroy this ship," Kane said. Carter's eyes widened. "Captain, if we do that while we're still on board—" "I know," Kane cut in. "But this ship is the command vessel. If we take it out, we cripple their entire operation." Rhea hesitated. "Kane, if we can't make it off in time—" "We'll make it," he said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. Voss coughed again, pulling something from inside his tattered uniform, a small data chip. "This has the enemy fleet's movement patterns," he said. "If the Vanguard gets this, they can still win." Kane grabbed the chip and nodded. "We end this." The final battle had begun. The final pursuit. The enemy flagship trembled as explosions rocked its core. Kane and his team moved fast, sprinting through dimly lit corridors as sirens blared overhead. "We need to overload the main reactor," Rhea said, her fingers flying across a stolen datapad. "Once it blows, this whole ship, and its AI fleet, goes with it." Carter shot down an enemy soldier who rounded the corner. "We'd better hurry. More of Holloway's troops are inbound." Kane gritted his teeth. They were running out of time. The last stand. They reached the reactor chamber, a massive, pulsing core at the heart of the ship. Rhea and Voss immediately got to work, bypassing security locks and hacking into the ship's systems. "We need at least 5 minutes to overload the reactor," Rhea called. Kane turned to Carter and the rest of the team. "Then we buy them 5 minutes." They took defensive positions, rifles aimed at the entrance. Seconds later, enemy soldiers poured in. Blaster fire lit up the chamber, energy bolts scorching the walls. Kane fired shot after shot, his muscles burning as he fought to hold the line. A soldier lunged at him with a blade. Kane sidestepped, slammed his elbow into the traitor's gut, and finished him with a precise shot. 2 minutes, Rhea shouted. More enemies stormed in. The fight turned desperate. Then, a cold voice echoed through the ship. "Kane." Kane's stomach twisted. He knew that voice. Holloway. The final confrontation. From the shadows of the reactor room, Holloway emerged. He was still in his old Federation uniform, but the insignia had been ripped away, replaced with his twisted new symbol. "You never knew when to stop," Holloway said, stepping forward. Kane raised his weapon. "You betrayed your own people." Holloway smirked. "I saved them. The Federation is weak, corrupt. It was always going to fall. I just gave humanity a new future." Kane clenched his jaw. "A future where you're the dictator." Holloway sighed. "You could have been part of it, Kane. But instead, you chose to fight for a system that's already dying." Kane didn't hesitate. He fired. Holloway dodged, drawing his own weapon. The two men clashed, dodging and countering each other's attacks. Blows landed, shots were fired. The ship rumbled violently. The reactor was overloading. Holloway lunged, but Kane caught his arm, twisting it behind his back and slamming him against a control panel. "You lose," Kane growled. Holloway grinned, blood dripping from his mouth. "Do I?" A countdown began on the control panel. Kane's eyes widened. Holloway had triggered an emergency eye launch. "Too late," Holloway whispered. Kane didn't hesitate. He grabbed Holloway's own weapon and fired point blank. Holloway fell. But the countdown still ticked away. The escape. "We have to go now," Rhea shouted. Kane turned, breathing heavily. "Is the reactor set?" Rhea nodded. "This ship is done. But if we don't leave in the next 60 seconds, so are we." They sprinted to the hangar, blasting their way through the last of Holloway's forces. A single enemy fighter remained, their only way out. Kane and his team piled in, strapping into seats as Rhea fought the controls. "Hang on," she shouted. The ship lurched forward, blasting out of the hangar bay. Behind them, the enemy flagship erupted in a massive fireball, taking Holloway's AI fleet with it. In the distance, the Vanguard and the remaining Federation ships saw the explosion. Admiral Pierce's voice crackled through the comms. "Kane, are you alive?" Kane exhaled. "Barely." Cheers erupted over the comms. The war was over. The traitors were gone. And humanity had survived once again. Epilogue. The aftermath. Days later, aboard the Vanguard, Kane stood on the observation deck, watching the stars. The Federation had won, but at a heavy cost. The scars of this war would remain. Rhea joined him, arms crossed. Holloway was right about one thing. Kane glanced at her. "What's that?" "The Federation is changing," she said. "The question is, will it be for the better?" Kane sighed. "That's not up to us. We just make sure the right people are around to protect it." He turned back to the stars. The war had ended, but Kane knew one thing for certain. Humanity would always have enemies, and he would always be ready. End of Part 7. Word count. ~800.